Mm-hmm.
Well, I want to stay with the session on Wednesday on the theme of the tools for truth. I don't like that label, but what I got at the moment. I like the intent of it. I think tools for truth has sort of got a funny ring. But, you know, a couple of statements. There's a statement, truth will set you free. David said the only freedom is the freedom from memory links. And what I've said here recently is that truth is a struggle, yet secrets are a burden. And then if we bring these three elements of how we could be truthful in the world and still be nourishing and not destructive. There are those three elements: transparency, script lines, and straight messages. I guess I want to bring them into Evaluation Strata with your help, because I think it makes them central and gives them more oomph.
Gives them more what, Peter? Oomph, did you say?
Oomph, yeah. Gives them more gravitas, gives them more significance in the Pellon contribution training theory and training.
Can I just ask you a question?
Yeah.
I'm just curious. I feel that, but I'm curious of your thought processes about why you didn't put them in communication strata, the three elements.
Yeah, because I didn't think to.
No, I think it's better here. I'm not sure why, but
no. Hold on a minute. I'm just going to lift my tea over. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Oh, right.
Nikki said something that you should hear, Peter.
Is he back?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I just said, well, thank goodness you didn't put anything else on communication strata, because communication strata has already got that one absolutely mind-blowingly simple and brilliantly useful thing about communication between two people is at the level of the lowest person's ability, not halfway between the two. And what a shame it would be to sort of overburden the simplicity and hugeness of that thing with a whole lot of other stuff. So I'm glad you put it somewhere else.
Yeah, that was my thinking. Okay. That's
Mary just said to say it to you because that might have been your unconscious thinking.
No,
I'm serious.
Yeah, no, you might be right. I think I wanted to put them. I like that point, Nikki. I think it's I think it's important in this instance, but if we take it slightly differently, I think it's a methodological point almost a processing point that we need to keep in mind, because to be really frank, in the search to keep my life interesting, okay, I could overburden some of the tools. And I think I need the different task of simplifying them. So one of the things I think the material on truth can be simple because there's a certain way truth is simple. But transparency, script lines, and straight messages all came up in different times in our history, in different ways. You know, there are sort of long stories behind each three of them, actually. But putting those aside, what we have is, let me use a different word for a moment, sort of three ideas, three intentions. I'll be transparent, and that means I'll let people know who I am and take risks about that. Script lines are, I will explain myself to the world in a way in which I am defended and secure and safe. And straight messages are an idea and intention that let's try and not manipulate and lie, and let's try and give straight messages about what we think and feel about something, what we've decided, and not beat around the bush with manipulation and evasion. Yeah, I guess the opposite of straight messages is manipulation and evasion. If we bring all of those into evaluation strata, which in terms of Nikki's point is pretty crowded anyway, and maybe it's okay for evaluation strata to be crowded, because all the other things feed into evaluation strata. Evaluation is the seventh level of, pardon me. Evaluation strata is the is the seventh level of listening. So,
isn't it the one in the middle? Am I misremembering, or are you misremembering?
No, you're misremembering.
No, evaluation's in the middle, but it's the seventh level of listening, is what Peter just said.
Yeah. No, you're right. Absolutely.
So you're talking about the levels of listening, and I'm talking about strata.
Yeah, I think I missed. I misdescribed it, Nikki. Right. I was talking about both.
As we've interrupted your flow anyway, can Cynthia ask her question or whatever it is?
Yeah.
Well, when you're talking,
if I get Cynthia's. Then I go blank.
No, you're still showing to us, Peter. It's just manipulating your screen. You're still showing to us, don't worry.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I am.
Go ahead, Cynthia.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I was thinking when you're talking about this, it seems to me that this would be sort of where communication and evaluation strata intersect. Because a lot of there's a lot of decisions that you're making too, like as to how transparent to be, whether to stay protected, you also don't want to hurt somebody, and those all go into evaluation, but there's still communication strata in terms of how you actually do it. So I don't know. I was
no. I think
you're a good point.
I don't think there's any doubt. You're absolutely right about that. That's the way it is. And in terms of Mary's question at the beginning, no, I wasn't thinking about that, but I think what we will have ultimately is these transparency script lines, straight messages in both. But maybe it's useful to think about keeping communication strata really clean, the way Nikki suggested. So,
well, I think what Cynthia said just shows that they are in both, in practical terms,
exactly.
however you present them. And it's very interesting what she said, because it really is a different process. The evaluative decisions about when and what to say about each of those things is a different process from the action of actually saying them with the best words, as it were.
No, you're right. But you're absolutely right, Cynthia, and it's a great point. It is the interconnection between the two of them, and we've got to find a way to present that with growing simplicity, okay?
Not complexity.
And I think we'll get there, because I think we have achieved the simplicity about transparency, script line, straight messages. We sort of know what they are.
Can I just say, Peter, that sentence definition you gave this morning was very good, I think, and that's new as the point of view as a listener, to have a simple statement about straight messages, an ideal and intention. Let's not manipulate, lie, or evade. We haven't had that. We've spent these weeks getting to that one statement. So it just is in process, and it's going along nicely. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Cynthia.
Yeah, and I also like that because and I like it better when you stick to straight rather than direct, because it also excludes the depending on your language and culture, different levels of politeness. I mean, if you're kind of being indirect because you're being polite, it's not that you're lying or evading. And hopefully you're in a situation, everybody in the culture knows, everybody knows what you're saying. You're just doing it in a way that's a little softer, which is different than if you're actually manipulating or lying or evading.
Yeah.
And when everybody in the culture knows that, then it's still proper communication. It's proper communication.
Yeah.
Because they're all in on it.
Yeah, and that is true, because the culture I grew up with, Australia, before and after the Second World War, I left Australia when I was 24 in 1958. That was a culture where men could not express affection to other men. So they did it with insults. And that's a very Australian, also very Northern England sort of thing. Oh, you old bastard, or whatever. And that, it would be unfair to say, well, that's not a straight message, because you're not saying I really care about you. But no, it is a straight. Yeah, Nikki.
Can I say something about straight messages, including tone of voice and sort of intention and everything? Because that's what I know about within my family. Unstraight messages being words saying this and tone of voice saying that, and who knows what the intention is. When I used to work it out, well, the conscious intention is the words, but the unconscious intention that actually communicates much more clearly is the unconscious, is the tone of voice, which was, always negative and complicated, and then working out what the hell's what from the beginning to the end as well, so you wouldn't necessarily end up in the same place as it started. So there's that comment I wanted to make. And then I just remembered something when you gave that example of, and it's not northern men, it's still blokey thing, isn't it? Oh, you old bastard, all that, but it's fond and everything. I'm just remembering once, years ago, I was on the tube and it was waiting at a station. And there were two very young parents there with a toddler in a buggy. And this teenage dad, he looked like a teenage dad to me. Obviously, you know, he really loved this little boy. And the little boy was just beaming and happy. And they were facing each other. The man was sitting down, you know, and they're facing each other, properly communicating, although not a lot of words. And this little boy suddenly said, he was just brimming with love for his daddy. So, and in a way that you just spoke in a way that was just obvious to everybody on the tube who heard it, which was all of us, that this is what how his daddy communicated his love to him. He suddenly went to his daddy, "You little bastard," like that, absolutely full of love. And we all just laughed, you know, because it was so joyous. I just knew that's clearly what that young man said to his little boy, but totally loving him, you know, communicating love.
What a great story, Nikki.
No, it really is.
Peter, I had a question. May I go to do with the cultural thing? So I was thinking about straight messages and how this would fit in with straight messages. We're just talking about how in a society like Japan, where everyone knows that you're not kind of straight, it's not bad communication because everyone's got the same belief and understanding about how to communicate. And I was just thinking about wondering how this fit in, because my experience in Italy, Mexico, and Ireland is all Catholic countries in the main, is that if you say, I need my car looked at, in Mexico, they say, I'm coming right now. And if you say in Italy is, when will my car be ready? And they say, domani. Now, what that means is in Mexico, they don't really have any intention of coming now. All of these examples, just the bus go to the place, they'll put you on the wrong bus rather than tell you the bus doesn't go where you want to go because of not wanting to disappoint you and wanting to please you. So it's not lying and evasion, but it's not very straight. So how does that fit in, do you think, if it does?
Well, I think
when people know that they're not meaning what they're saying.
I think that when you get, I'll go back to my sort of opening statement, or two opening statements, three opening statements. Truth will set you free. David Pellant's statement, the only freedom is the freedom from memory links. And my statement here is that truth is a struggle and secrets are a burden. So I think we're sort of getting at what is a truthful statement. And of course, philosophers have argued forever about what is truth. And I don't know if my philosopher friends would be critical of me in terms of what I'm presenting. But there are things where the lack of truth and the lack of real Cynthia.
Well, I was thinking instead of truth, which, because I have to admit, I've been having some problems with that, because I think of truth as ultimate truth and our facts truth, but that's
all of that, yeah.
Right. But how about maybe just change the word to honesty?
Yeah, I don't think it had, I thought about that, and I guess I still want to think about it. Honesty somehow or other doesn't quite have the same spread, I think. And because, I do want to keep the work interesting for me, and I want to keep it young, and I want to keep it changing. Mary.
Well, I was thinking about that right at the beginning of this session. I tried it out for myself whether honesty works, and it doesn't, because there is something philosophical that you're grasping for in this. There is a bigger issue in this that you're reflecting the tools against, and just being honest in what you say isn't the bigger issue that you're grasping for.
No, and also there's, because just to say this briefly, because it's something else I'm working on and want to bring it close.
Sorry, can I just say a little comment to Cynthia? When having the same, sharing the same face and things, and so thinking of truth with a capital T, any time I use truth in what you might call a worldly context, I just think of it as relative truth. Like, we're not trying to talk about absolute truth. That's for some of us and not for all of us. Whereas a truth inside human relations and living in the world that is aspirational for those, can be aspirational, is about relative things, isn't it? The truth of what you're saying to them is still about relative things, if you see what I mean. So that's how I deal with it.
I struggle with that, because I think the bit I would like to say, and again, this is work in progress, I don't quite know where it's going, except in terms of today's subject, lesson plan, is about placing transparency, script lines, and straight messages centrally in Evaluation Strata to give it some sort of oomph. Now, I think if we expand Evaluation Strata out and with these three tools, transparency, script line, straight messages, it gets us to a place where I want to go with Pelham, and that is, we don't run away from value judgments. We don't want to run away from issues of good and evil. And, two names and one religion, Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, and the Quakers, okay? Now, those two weren't actually part of the Quakers, but, what is the question of truth? And, if someone is denying that people who are slaves are unhappy, I mean, just that simple statement. There were books written and sermons given about how they were happy. It was the Quakers who first in America said, you cannot be part of our congregation if you own slaves. Yeah, Cynthia.
Well, actually, listening, maybe Tools for Truth, as long as it's coupled with the whole concept of the truth line, that we only have a small bit of it.
Yeah. Well, that is something I think in my writing I do consistently, but I think we cease.
You're muted. She wasn't trying to say
Okay.
something, I think. Yeah, I think I forgot that, Cynthia, but I think that's what I do, because that is the overriding, underlying assumption inside Helen, that we are talking about the truth line. And then it's that thing of you can go for the bit you want with passion. And that's what Peter's doing here.
Yeah. There's something, particularly in my field of work, which I feel has got a long history. I guess you could say, sort of reducing everything to psychotherapy or psychology, and that enabled people who, I guess I would say, from the point of view of my age, should have known better. You can't, we're not going to look at that, or, values clarification means that, there's a reason behind people doing bad things, and you should look at the psychology and the psychodynamics of it, whatever. There's something, to me, that's a cop-out. That even if we get it wrong, even though we're sort of all muddled up, and we should still have a shot at it. We still should have a shot at, what does it mean if young Black women athletes here in England don't want to go running at night? They might be attacked, they might be raped, they might be killed. What does that mean? And what does it mean when we don't have, because Mary's brother Alan is visiting me at the moment. He's a school teacher. I love talking to Alan about kids in school and kids. It's rather routine. I didn't know this. In England, that classes and whole schools do meditation on a regular basis. And they have a form of meditation. I couldn't. Did some sound come in?
I noticed my sweat. It wasn't me. It must have been a background noise. I'll mute.
Yeah, it's okay. And American schools in some places are not going to teach kids civics. And then you get bad things happening. And I guess, thank you, Cynthia. It's only out a little bit of the truth, but we're saying, and this is rather than, because transparency, Scriptline, straight messages were very much peripheral tools or ideas. They weren't central. And yet, in a way, they were central in our practice, in our values. And I guess I want to bring it in an evaluation strata, which is about evaluating in terms of hurt and purpose, and making that a very serious study, using advisors, and the more hurt that's around and the more responsibility we carry, the more advisors we need, and the more diverse those advisors need to be. Very, very, very clear. And I think that means that at times, I would say, and again, it's a work in progress, okay? You know, I feel there's a moral dimension about transparency. You know, a client asking a practitioner like me, say, who, you know, I have the ability to develop trust and closeness, as so many other people in my field have, you know. But a client seriously asks, well, what are your values? Or have you ever been, are you married? Have you ever had trouble in your marriage? And my response is, you know, why do you need to? What is the malfunction in your psychology that means you need to ask me those questions? I think that's ethically questionable. Mary.
I was just going to make the same point when we started talking about this. You know, you are actually trained to say, well, why do you think you're asking me that question? They train therapists to do that. It's like, it blows my mind.
Yeah.
How awful that is. Oh, God. Anyway,
yeah, this is where, and I promise I won't go into a long story, but this is where, when I first developed transparency, it was very conscious on my part, very conscious. I guess in my own way, I thought it was a contribution. But I quickly learned to bring in Martin Buber, Carl Rogers, William James, Martin Luther King, to essentially say, buzz off, you know, don't come at me with your, you know, take them on. Because it was totally unacceptable, totally unacceptable. I was called down for it. I remember that. Yeah.
I was just thinking, I mean, it sort of, as a client, it never occurred to me to ask a therapist, you know, what about this and that about you? But, you know, obviously I always had Pelin trained therapists at the beginning. So I knew instinctively how helpful it was when they shared something of themselves. But so anyway, I've never contemplated the question, what would it have felt like to me as a client if I had said to a therapist, oh, well, have you ever experienced this thing? And they'd said, well, what is it about you that do you think that makes you ask me that question? I think I would have, depending on the now, if they genuinely sounded interested about me, that would be different. That'd be like if they were coming from caring, and you can tell, and that they might tell you a bit later or something. But if it's that clever therapeutic device, which is a power holding device, I think I would have experienced that as very clear communication, as in, I would know, right, I do not trust you. Not they don't trust me. I would know. They would have communicated to me that I, from that moment, am completely confirmed in I must not trust them. And if that had been in early days of therapy, or say if I'd been able to get therapy when I was, well, imagine if I'd been able to get therapy when I was a child, when it would have looked obvious that I needed it because I didn't speak. I mean, that's completely, that would have stopped me speaking for another 10 years. I would never, ever speak to that person if they'd done that to me.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know what I'm saying. I'm saying it's a straight message in a cockeyed way, which is exactly the thing I'm used to.
Yeah, because, and I'm sure this is the case. I mean, if someone delivered the straight message, Mary's point, people are trained to work this way, and said, well, I don't answer questions like that because the way I work as a therapist is better not to. There are probably some people who did that well because they're, it's hard not to believe that in which you are trained and in which you achieve some status and rewards and recognition. Hard to do that, so the way Niebuhr said it was moral man, immoral society. I think I've got it right. And the systems are corrupt, and I guess some of the motivation to explore these three things, put them in evaluation strata, make very clear what evaluation strata is. I mean, Dave didn't make the statement flippantly. He was Jewish, but he said, if there was evaluation in terms of hurt, Hitler couldn't have come to power. There was only evaluation in terms of purpose. And that is documented brilliantly all over the place. Cynthia.
Well, I have to admit that whole training of saying that, to me, if a therapist had said that to me, that would be the end. But I would ask some questions at the beginning, like, I had very clear, if there's a therapist, particularly when I was doing couples counseling with my spouse, we went to a gay therapist, but it's a bunch in contrast to what lawyers are taught. In fact, we're supposed to, ethically, we're bound to, if we have any conflict of interest, whether it's whether it's a concrete one, like you've represented somebody who is connected to the other side, but you're even supposed to be transparent about your beliefs if you have a duty of full disclosure if it would impact your representation of the client in any way. Like say, you were representing, criminal defense and you had a crime that, any type of, and then, first you had a duty not to represent the client in certain situations, and if you didn't think you could do it, and if you did think you can do it, then you still had to disclose it and get the client's permission with full disclosure. So the contrast in what therapists are taught is okay. So anyways,
Sheesh.
I'm sorry I missed the first part of this. I have a fly here that keeps, I'm not sure if this is relevant, but I know with when counseling, I always let them know up front when, along with what Cynthia is saying, when I would have to report something like for child abuse or sexual abuse, or if a teenager told me they were in danger of hurting themselves, I would be obligated to tell their parents that this was concern. I would let them know what the barrier is there, where I would have to might have to do something to talk to. So as far as people will ask me what kind of therapy I do, I explain that to them and what's involved and what are the pros and cons, or let them choose what kind of therapy they want. But I make it really clear that that it's all confidential, assuming those other things I mentioned. People rarely, I tell them right up front what kind of therapy I do and explain it as part of the educational part. So there's no real mystery. And like you were saying, Cynthia, referring to people ask me, do I treat people who are gay or transsexual? So I tell them my experience with that and let them know that I'm on board with that. But they'll ask about other kinds of things too. Not all the time am I proficient in that, so I'll say, but I'll find you somebody that could be helpful to you if that's the main issue you want to talk about. That's something I don't have the experience or the training for that. And I'm not sure, people ask what kind of therapy or what's your view on whatever. And if it seems relevant, I'll talk with them about it. But usually they're just trying to find out whether it's safe or not. That's been my impression to talk about it. And so, I just let them know what the legal restrictions would be. But other than that, it's better if they talk about what they're concerned about.
Yeah.
But if it's too, I feel like the other point would be if it's too much for them to deal with, then we talk about what would be a step that they might want to take in that. They may not be able to talk about whatever abuse happened to them, but maybe they could talk about something related to that. So I try to let them help figure out what's the safety issues for them.
What about if someone asks you a personal question, which is what we were talking about?
So if somebody what?
If somebody asks you a personal question, that's what we were talking about.
If somebody, I couldn't understand.
Asks you a personal question about your values or your experience.
Oh, okay. About a certain topic.
Well, just saying that's the context of the discussion that we were having was about therapists holding on to power if somebody asked them a question about themselves.
Mm-hmm. Like if I was married or divorced or something like that, or had kids. Usually that I can usually say I'm divorced, I'm married, or have children. I won't go into what happened. Usually, there might be a time where I can say, I understand, I get where you're at, because I had a similar situation, but I don't usually give them a lot of details about it. Does that make sense? I mean, if they're saying they're having a hard time with the divorce, I'll say, yeah, I had a lot of problem getting through my divorce, and that was really upsetting for me. But I wouldn't go into much detail because that's doesn't seem that helpful to people.
I think I think Scriptlines come in here really powerfully. I think someone could say, well, what are your views on Donald Trump? Just say, a client. Or what are your views on born-again Christian? I don't think that there's nothing in Pelham that sort of says, let it all hang out, be spontaneous, be authentic, talk from your gut or talk from your heart. There's nothing in Pelham that says that, Our bottom line is, which is a bit we're talking about here, evaluating in terms of hurt as well as purpose. So, I think there's a way to say, well, he is not someone I admire, or he is not someone I would vote for. But I don't want to talk about it more now than that. My view is, if the script lines have some reality, people will accept it. Now, it might be the case that someone doesn't accept it and someone wants to go from challenging one therapist to another, okay? Cease.
Yeah, I want to just finish up because I guess I didn't understand. I would say if that's something really important to you, that you have somebody that's backs Trump and somehow that fits into your therapy, we can look at finding you a different therapist, because I would not be a fit for you.
Yeah,
if that's that important. If it's not, if you're just curious, then I don't think it really is related to your therapy either. So let's look at it. Sometimes that's a diversion, like, you know, so I just, what about it? You know, I get more into what are the values that you have that you think would be important in your therapy? And I might look at it that way.
Yeah, although I am critical of my field of work, because I think there's something sort of ordinary and common sense. I wrote a piece once that I called "What's Wrong with a Heart-to-Heart Talk in a Therapeutic Relationship?" And I guess I'd probably draw a parallel to how a teacher will relate to a class of older teenagers. And, you know, I think there's who are you? You know, what sort of a person are you? What do you believe in? And particularly, I think as we take this work further, I think as trust develops, I think there's a certain sort of two-way street that you trust me and you'll tell me anything, and you'll tell me things that you never told anyone before in your life. That happens to good therapists, happens with good therapists. But part of that process, I feel that I feel there's some, just the same as you know, it's something similar to the no rule in Pelham. Someone says, no, we don't diagnose it. And we're quite firm on that. And one of the ways I argue that, which again was not popular or acceptable, and I think even now it's swung the other way. Shame Nan's not here. You probably know, Sue. But my understanding is the pressure to come up with a diagnosis is very large. I have been told. And what we're saying is, no, we're not going to provide a diagnosis. We're going to go slower than that. If it helps, we will. This point's quite complex. But if trust builds, then I think, in terms of Martin Buber, I think in terms of Christianity, there's an obligation that if you ask me a question, you are giving me this power. You are giving me power because you are telling me things you have never told anybody else. That sort of fact is fairly routine with someone who's pretty good at their job and been in the field for a bunch of time. It's not unusual. Then what is the reciprocality about that? There's a term in other fields of social sciences. What is the countervailing force that needs to be in place? And this would be my question. Otherwise, am I inviting you to put me on some sort of pedestal that is not going to work? Mary.
Well, I just wanted to say about transparency that if I have a depressed client and they are painfully telling me with great shame about how they didn't get up at all, or they didn't get up till 3, or they can't take a shower, I can't think of a time when I haven't briefly disclosed that, yeah, when I'm depressed, I've had times when I couldn't get up till 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And that was necessary because the context was I was going to help them see that the tiniest thing, like getting out of bed at 3 o'clock rather than not getting out of bed at all, was a huge accomplishment. How could they know it was a huge accomplishment unless I knew what that felt like? And I was victim too. Because it doesn't make sense to people who haven't been that depressed. You know, managing to get out of bed or managing to turn the shower tap on, that's not a big accomplishment, but it is when you're that depressed. And it's very important, very much, you'll know the client I'm talking about, that is hugely the path, the beginning of the path to her like radiant health now, radiant mental health, was that issue. That I knew the depth to which she went in her depression.
Yeah. And I think we have and anyway, if I can bring it back to evaluation strata, transparency, Scriptlines, straight messages, I think what Cece is saying it right. We can have a script line. So transparency comes across brief, light, because my experience is that most clients aren't being resistant. There's not some sort of pathology behind them asking questions at all. 85%. I mean, I'd stand on those figures in a public debate. Not many. They just like a really bright 16-year-old girl. She just wants to ask the teacher a question. There is something sort of fundamentally odd word, truthful about that. I mean, I'm using truth there in the sense, you know, these truths are, you know, the American Constitution makes that claim. Cynthia. And this is stuff we're throwing around, by the way. I'm not teaching you something from Pelham that's sort of absolutely tidied up. I'm teaching you something where Pelham is engaged in a work in progress. Cynthia.
What I was going to say was that I think there's going to be a big difference in listening to it as a client, because that's, you know, I'm not a therapist and things are different as an astrologer. But one of the things that I would have a much, much different reaction from a therapist saying to me, you know, I really, this is my private life and I choose to keep it private.
Yeah.
No problem at all.
Yeah.
But so I say, but it's a much different thing with somebody saying, so what is it about you that you're asking this question? That's a whole different response that
Yeah.
you know, I mean, the second one seems almost violent. The first one seemed, okay, you know, you have your choice, of that's your choice, and you know, it's, but that other one is just kind of, I mean, it seems almost mean. I hate to, at least
Well,
from
I'm critical that some of the basic assumptions in our field, and this I am heading towards quicksand and must not go there. But, you know, I think we've got perhaps a lot to learn from the best of modern education. I know there's some things that are moving our way, like the use of self-disclosure. I can't get my head around it yet, but I do feel there's something better. That's a South London accent. Something way better about transparency than self-disclosure. There's something funny about self-disclosure. Maybe it's the concept that I've got the control. I can't get it. Mary.
I was going to make a different point, but I think that's it, Peter. I think you've hit the nail on the head there. That self-disclosure is like really keeping control. But what I was actually going to say was, in saying about script, it hadn't occurred to me, even though you've been doing it for weeks, in putting together script lines and transparency is a huge relief for me, and I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
Because you've always taught transparency as when you're transparent, you have some vulnerability. I know the vulnerability in script lines is different. So I use that teaching with the word vulnerability and to kind of not browbeat, but to put myself down for the way I was transparent, because I was developing script lines without realizing it. You know, like your one about having been divorced 4 times. I didn't go into over detail, I don't think, or, you know. Anyway, the point was I worried about the way I was transparent because I didn't feel that vulnerable when I was saying things. So to put this, theoretically put together script lines and transparency is a huge relief for me.
And then I think, if I could just add to that, Mary, then I think if we can bring in straight messages, okay? And that means, am I presenting something that's real, you know? Yeah. So I think there's checks and balances there between those.
You mean as part of evaluating, is saying like, okay, that came off a bit almost flippant. Is it, am I still doing straight message that's real?
Yeah, and that brings it straight into evaluation strata, which means in terms of the whole body of work, these 3 things are right in the middle, which means truth is right in the middle, rather than the 3 things being a little on the side.
Do you mind if I say something I'm sort of waiting to say?
Sure.
Which might not be directly related to what where your head's just thinking now, but I've become aware of what it is I do as a practitioner, or my the way that I use transparency most over time, or have done over time. I'm just really realizing now is when it's somebody with stuff that's similar to mine, and it just happens that that kind of stuff is really intricate, psychological, mind-bending, trying to figure out what the hell somebody means or mental, and oh yeah, I know what I call the still doing it merchants. You know, people adults obviously who've got parents who are alive and are still doing it. still projecting everything they project, still trying to make them believe it, still completely keeping all the power, still, whatever all the intricacies and the dynamics between the respective parents all are. And yeah, the poor adult, 40-year-old, 50-year-old is still having to deal with these same things happening in the present. Or even if they've ended by dying, they're still doing it as an adult. That's the bit where it really goes, oh, that's similar. And what I do, I use me as the working model. So obviously it'll be someone I've known over time, and we work through whatever the current manifestations of stuff are in their work or their marriage or their this or that, blah blah blah, and then they keep coming because they've got a parent like that. And in the end, we're just down to that. We've got all their present life sorted out except this damn thing, which is the originating thing. And then and little by little, I will have disclosed some little matching example here and there, when they'll say, oh, my mum said this, that, and the other last weekend or whatever. And we'll intricately have to figure out how this has done their head in on this occasion and how it links to previous and then and then and then. And I'll bring in my ones, and I'm a working model. I use myself as that. And some of them, I know that there'll be this bit that's identical or it's a bit similar, but and then as time goes by, they accumulate that information about me, and it's really like a training model. Like I'm ahead with mine. I've figured out this and that and all these dynamics, and when they used to say that, I've worked out that what they meant was that and this and that and the other. And so I know I'm using it's like a sort of scientific thing so that they can go, aha, and mine is like this and that. And then we figure it out together for them to get on top of all the crazy intricacies that are inside their head that are nothing to do with them. That's the thing that's in common. Let me see if there was something else I have to say about that. Yeah, so it's not about values. It's not. So I don't know. I've never been trained any other way, and I've never gone through accreditation, so I've never had it beaten out of me. But I know that it is a ridiculously useful thing to use with people that really saves a lot of time, because rather than everybody having to work out their own every detail of their excruciating thingies, they can compare and contrast with the one I'm giving them and go, oh, mine's like this and that. Okay, I'll stop there.
Yeah, I just comment on that because I'd really like to. I think the statement working model is really good, okay? And that a nice confirmation for me, because when he said, I'm Bill, I'm an alcoholic, he is saying, I'm Bill, I'm a working model. He's not saying, I'm Bill, I've set up Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm successful as an...
I've figured it all out.
Yeah. No. He's not saying no. And there's no additions to it. It's not, I'm Bill, I'm an alcoholic, and I'm also a founder of AA. It's, I'm Bill, I'm an alcoholic. And I think that's a working model. And yeah, I really appreciate you coming up with the term, Nikki, because I think, and I guess there's something about transparency, how we convey it, sort of, and that's where straight messages and script lines are important. You know, are we, yeah, I think working model, there's something about working model that's like, I am this sort of person. I mean, that's what Carl Rogers said at the end of his life. It's not theories, it's person to person. And you can't go person to person without transparency. It doesn't make sense. But I just finished the thought. So I think I'm conveying something like, I've been divorced 4 times, but I'm a working model of someone who can go through hard times and come out the other end. You know, I'm a working model of the human struggle, rather than because I've got training and degrees and status, I'm not a working model anymore. I don't think it hangs together. Mary, sorry.
Well, I only wanted to thank Nikki for that phrase as well, because in what you were saying, I could trace the way I used almost like psychoeducation, my struggles around what worked to notch depression up and over enthusiastic spirits down. And it was using transparency educationally as a working model and presenting. I used to worry about this thing, and maybe because of my performance life force, I used to worry about doing what you said Bill didn't do, you know, having a bit too much of I'm successful or not. That was just my struggle around it, especially as I still had depressions, but the intention behind it was working model.
I think if you've got a working model, I'll be careful, Nikki. I'm going to use the first person in a way that's silly. Okay. If someone is a priest, if someone is a trainer of girl gymnasts, the lack of transparency, the lack of straight messages, script lines shouldn't even be there, creates evil. It just does. You know, if you look at the number of girls who've been damaged, and Michigan, in a sense, Michigan and Ohio were my bases in the States. And that was East Lansing, where that doctor operated. So there's something about, I guess I would question anything, this is a stronger statement, in terms of that small part of the truth, I would question anything that denies transparency. I'm not saying it's necessarily wrong. I'm saying it should be open to question. Withheld knowledge is power. Yeah.
Sorry, Peter, did you say withheld knowledge is power?
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things, actually, I've been very comforted by this discussion, because from my own memory links, I've known family members and people who have, read a few self-help books, decided you have to be honest, and the whole concept between self-disclosure and transparency, and then everybody else has to be honest too, and it just turned out to be a big mess and a big fight, and people were mean to each other because they had to express their feelings honestly and open. And I'm like, oh gosh, no. But there's a difference linking it with evaluation strata and that whole, I think was it very something that came out the whole, or maybe it was the whole difference between self-disclosure and transparency. Just that made a huge amount of sense, because actually you're with the self-disclosure idea, you're more likely, I mean, there's all sorts of reasons why it's not, you don't necessarily want to, tell your whole story. Your story might be triggering to somebody, there's reasons to be careful, so I guess I'm coming at from the opposite end with people who were trying to do it and did it badly, and you know, especially when you try to, well, and then a lot of it's not, actually, they probably weren't being transparent because they were trying to make everybody else be transparent. And, you know, we're all going to, this whole family is going to tell what they feel about each other. You know?
Yeah. Let me just say something about that might be reassuring. That whole sort of point of view became very popular and fashionable within the Gestalt movement. And even now, you know, I can name people in the Gestalt movement who just can't say something nice because you've got to say this hard edge thing. It's a funny sort of dynamic. And I don't like it. What's wrong with nice? You know, the Fritz Perls would probably laugh at me. But he wasn't thinking of what our responsibility in this hard times is to think this stuff through thoroughly. You know,
can I add
absolutely. Yes, Nikki.
Because I think I was just going to say, up to what Cynthia said about that, I was taking for granted, like as a therapist, you're using transparency. It's consciously for the benefit of the client. And now I'm aware sometimes I can go into a bit of enjoying something, but you know, with the client, and that bit of it's for me, but I start and finish whatever it is I'm saying that's some kind of disclosure for them, you know. And if I get a little perk in the middle, then and I know they're happy, you know, we might have a laugh in the middle together as well. But so transparency is for the purpose of the client. And then you, Peter, then just said about that Gestalt thing, and that's got a hard edge. And I'm thinking, well, this is caring life force versus material life force, isn't it? So if you're being transparent and overall you are consciously and deliberately aware that you are stepping in and disclosing something about yourself, like in that kind of thing that I gave the example, and it's for that person because it sounds to me like this might help them figure out something for them, or that we have something together we could figure it out for them, versus the other thing is about holding power, isn't it? So that's material life force. Well, why would I want to go and pay someone to do that to me when what I need is nourishing care, you know?
No, I think we need a script line about you know, transparency. We're not denying its limitations. We're not denying that people can get it wrong. We're not denying that at times it could be something that doesn't work for the client, and at times it could be something that doesn't work for us. I think we need to sort of find a way to put the disclaimers way up front, and then we can refer to them. Yeah.
And that's the script line aspect, isn't it?
Thank you, Nikki. Yes, that's the script line aspect. That's, even the way I said it just now, you know, particularly if I continued with it, it would sort of end up being rambly. And script lines, you know, they go through 100 drafts, et cetera, et cetera. You know, we could find a bit, and it needs a good script line. Yep. And the other thing we explored here about script lines, if we've got a lot of caring life force, we'll tend to get them wrong. So we need to come up with a script line and then check it out with other people, which is Evaluation Strata. That's right in Evaluation Strata. And then if we go back to where we sort of started here today, and then we can bring it over to Communication Strata, right? It's something that's not overburdening, but just something that's neat and tidy and almost light, okay? I think it's the lightness we want to get. And what I want to do next Sunday, we'll do this topic on examples on Wednesday. But what I want to do next Sunday is the place of love in passive listening, okay? Because it's something about, and I think it's true of transparency, but it needs to be true of passive listening. I think if I'm correct, you know, the purpose of meditation is for people to be better people, and to be open in goodness is around them. I think, so what it is taking passive listening and putting a moral dimension in it directly, because I think it's there. I think it's...
Sorry, Peter, putting more of a dimension of what in? Taking passive listening and putting more of a dimension.
Moral.
Sorry?
Moral.
Oh, moral, putting a moral dimension. Oh, thank you. Sorry,
Yeah.
I misheard. That makes much more sense.
And I'm sort of not sure about this, but a couple of things, you know. I'm aware that the only place Dave mentioned love was in relation to his work on marriage, okay? Nowhere else. And it was rejectiveness, and then I made it caring life force. And caring life force is it's our home base. Not everyone in the world's home base, for sure, but it's that. And I feel in some ways for too long, I've sort of avoided, I mean, as you know, I've referred to it, but avoided sort of putting love in there. And then in that particular part of it, drawing on Martin Luther King's exploration of love. I mean, he would give these complex philosophical sermons to his congregation, who were ladies who worked as cleaners and left school when they were 12. He gave them these really complicated lectures and they just lap it up. And the reason I'm saying that is going back to some of that stuff that he developed well. He developed well in the civil rights movement, but it comes from different aspects of what love is in Greek philosophy. I mean, they're the links, Mary.
Well, I just wanted to say it's kind of shocking when you think about what Dave said. And what it leaves out is the whole vast gamut of love that's about friendship, like men in Italy who'll hold hands. And what I recently understood about wanting to stay here in Mexico is that, like what Cynthia and the others of us learned about Japan, it's a very, in Japan, it's a very amity or friendship-based society that's unashamedly about love in friendship and the centrality of friendship to leading a good life, which is a very, very underdeveloped aspect in the West. So I'm very encouraged by you saying this. I think it's really important morally and for the heart, what you're saying.
And I think it's there. I think what we've got to because one of the things I have is really hard to say. Passive listening's mine. I've developed it. That's a bit that's hard to say. And on the one hand, it's unique to us, and on the other hand, it's always been around in common sense. Both things are true. But I think within the spirit of Pelham, when we do go through the process of passive listening, whether it's passive listening to someone else's work, and, just taking it in as them, not with our thoughts about it, or whether it's passive listening to someone's feedback to us, or whether it's passive listening to someone who's got values that are different than ours. I think over all these years, I think I claim in Pelham, love is there. I think love has been there over all these years. And I think, by the way, because there was a particular intensity, Cynthia, to the at the virtual Pelham Italy retreat, and we all felt that after it. We're sort of sustained by, and we've got to be careful in Pelham that we just sort of go round the houses, not to mention the word love or the word affection. We say, well, we were all there with our caring life force. Okay. Something about making it fresher, younger is one of the reasons I want to put this in. And I know we've got to stop in a minute. Because I've made a very good meal, okay, for Alan.
Oh, nice. Excuse me, Pete. Oh, never mind, sorry.
Yeah. So I think we've had it there. I think it's sort of something in a good way, and certainly with help. And this is where it works a bit, isn't it? Because that's pretty sort of big stuff. Transparency, script lines, straight messages. And I think it could reduce something that I certainly would never want to compete with Martin Luther King's charisma. He could give boring intellectual sermons and get away with it. That's not me, okay? That's not me. I can't do that. Anyway, we need to stop there. Okay. I'm Peter. I'm in Norfolk, in England, and that's me. Nikki?
I'm in Wimbledon, whereas now jet black sky, shining silver moon.
Okay.
Cease, I'm in Tampa, Florida, where it's 2:39 in the afternoon.
Okay. Cynthia?
Cynthia, Kankakee, Illinois, and it is 1:39 here.
Okay, Mary?
Mary in Rosarito Beach. Going to have to really work hard on my pendulum because I'm swinging so high with the excitement of this discussion. And it's 20 to 12 here.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you for coming very much. And I hope to see you on Wednesday, and watch this space, okay?